I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
How about that?
Yeah.
Natural.
Freddie Pringle.
I
was worried he was going to throw a roll tide in there, but he didn't.
Yeah. Bobby would just edit it out, unfortunately.
Well, welcome everybody. We're in Rockville.
That's right,
Alabama, which is a suburb of Jackson, Alabama.
Yeah.
And we are right next to the Fred T. Stimpson Wildlife Sanctuary.
Epicenter.
Yes. And we are sitting with a man that we consider to be, and after you listen to, you will as well, Mr. Fred Pringle, a legend. And we just did a podcast about him capturing, releasing wild turkeys all over the state of Alabama. And now we want to talk about whitetail deer because he's done the same thing, all trapped here at this property that we're near, and we want to learn about it. So I think, Toxie, when you grew up down in this part of the world, and this area means so much to you. There's always been a lot of deer here, but people across the South and other parts of the country haven't always had the whitetail deer that we've got almost have too many.
Yeah, we got a lot.
So, yeah, because I told the story the other day, my great Uncle Jack Cottrell at home, they had a nice piece of property. And the Clark family, his daughter was Clark, married to Clark. Now the Clarks have it out there, our cousins. And deer, turkeys, so much wildlife. But back in the day, say in the early 60s even, mid-60s, he used to take me fishing all the time. He was like my granddaddy that, who I was named for passed away the day after I was born. So he was kind of like my granddaddy. We were very, very close. And they didn't have any deer at all. And I can remember him talking about, and that was in the early 60s, he was talking about, they called it the rocking chair fox hunters. They would go to his little cabin and sit on the porch in the rocking chairs and talk and listen. They turn their dogs loose running foxes and listen to them run foxes most of the night, some nights. So anyway, the rocking chair fox hunters. And that's what they did. And he was telling the story about going to look for a dog the next day they'd lost and looking and seeing a deer track. And when he got back to town, West Point's about 10 minutes, he started telling some people, like at the barbershop, some places, and a bunch of people drove back out to see the deer track. That's how few deer there were. Now, in the early 60s, I was coming down here hunting with Daddy, late 60s, and there was no shortage of deer. So I guess a little bit like turkeys, there was a high population of deer even back then down here. And so they did have wildlife to give to the rest of the world. They didn't have many, So.
Well, Mr. Fred, we learned in the other podcast that you started with the state of Alabama in 1965, and you moved here to this sanctuary, began work. Can you tell us about trapping and relocating deer? What was the state like then?
Well, when I come on in 65, deer trapping and relocation was about over with. I kind of got in on the tail end of it. About, I say 2 or 3 years after I went to work, we still did it. But what we used to trap deer was a box trap. But before then, when they first started, they used old pole traps made out of poles. And one of those traps, it had a drop door on each end. A deer will not go in one of them traps with one door down. But that trap was 40 inches high, 36 inches wide, 8 foot long. The trigger was in the middle, and I say 1.5 inches, 2 inches off the ground. And it come from each door down to that trigger on the outside. And we'd take the corn, trail it in and put it on the trigger. And as that deer's nose went under that trigger wire, it'd raise it and trip it. We've caught anywhere from deer, skunks, coons, possums, rabbits, jaybirds, quail, whatever.
Wow.
But the deer trapped itself. So we didn't have to sit there and wait for a deer to go in there and you pull a rope or something and that door would drop. But they trapped themselves.
So back
But-
back in the late, I guess the late 50s is probably there was trapping going on.
Oh
I remember
yeah, back then.
I remember seeing pictures in 1958.
yeah.
Bullitt County, Alabama,
Yeah.
got deer released.
Yeah.
So, when did that get started? Can you speak to that a bit?
Probably had to get started back in the 40s, late 40s.
And did that start here?
I really don't know. Well, the sanctuary was here. I reckon it did start on the sanctuary because it was set up in 1940, 39, 40. So I'd say late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah, and you had like even when you were young, y'all had a lot of deer.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of deer there. That's just like that one in there on my wall. That's what used to be on the sanctuary, but you don't see nothing like that now around here. But they quit deer trapping for several years. And on some of the management there, Charles Kitty come up with the idea we need to move some deer and jumpstart some of these areas that didn't have many deer on the area. And up there on Black Warrior, up north Alabama, we put 50 or 60 head of deer up there. I went up there so much I thought I lived up there. Then we put some in the Escambia County. I don't know where all we did put them, but we moved deer to kind of help jumpstart that population up. But I know up there in the Black Warrior, they had brought some Michigan deer up there, and they was hoping the native whitetail down here was going to crossbreed with the Michigan deer up there because the rut comes in at 2 different times. Up there, the Warrior, it may come in November. Down here, it's January before it starts. And they was hoping those would cross up there, but I don't know whether they ever did or not. I ain't heard nothing about it. But I was kind of on the tail end of the deer trapping.
Would the way you explained how to release turkeys, you had to have 5,000 acres and the cooperation for those in that area for the first 5 years. Was there anything similar to that for the deer?
I'm sure there was. Like I say, I came in on the tail end of it.
Yeah, I would catching deer one at a time, trapping deer one at a time. That's much slower business than the way
But
that
we
turkeys.
had on the sanctuary, we had 20-something traps down there, and on the upper sanctuary, we had like 14. And when we started back trapping deer, we pre-baited for 2 weeks, and that's what they called. Said we're gonna start trapping. We had 24 traps on Fred T. The first night, we caught 24 deer, a fox, and a bobcat. One trap, or 2 traps doubled.
I wonder what that bobcat was going after.
Quite a success ratio.
Maybe
I
he was
don't
trying
know
to
what
get a
he's going
squirrel in.
after, but he got surprised.
So y'all trap turkeys in the wintertime in January, February, March.
Same thing with deer.
Deer same time.
You got to move them in that cold weather.
That's what I was going to ask.
Because you take a turkey puts out a lot of heat. And I didn't like them old boxes, going back to turkeys. Them old wax boxes that NWT come out with.
Right.
The turkeys get hot in that thing.
So how'd you sedate them, or how'd you
Yeah,
get them?
transport 'em, right.
What was it like when the doors dropped? Were you ever watching? I guess you weren't really watching it because I don't know. Did they tear things up? Did they hurt themselves? How did they?
They'd bust up their nose or something, and we've had some in big bucks that bust the doors off of it.
Wow.
But we had 2 boxes. We had one small box we put the dough in. And we had a box that was what we call a squeeze box. A buck could go in so we could squeeze him up against the wall so we could put a tag in his ear.
Deer would go up in there. They'd take him from the trap into that squeeze box. Then you could pull him where he couldn't move at all, and then they could tag his ear.
So y'all didn't give them a shot of anything to sedate them? I bet they were strong as a.
Yes,
They're strong with a
I
mule.
wish I could.
Yeah.
I wish I could find that picture of them. Because like if you had a buck or whatever, they'd crack that. They'd let that door up just enough to where you could see about that much up in there. And whoever was on that end, they'd say, "Get ready." They'd reach in and grab him by the back legs, and they actually would literally pull the deer out, and they would hold him down. And
That's when
Get
they
'em
was.
up.
That's
It was-
whenever
it
Keith
was
Geis up
physical
there.
labor on that for sure.
Keith Geis Auburn was doing his thesis and wanted to get deer in the rut.
Right.
We was putting radios on them.
Radio collars.
Yeah.
When you grab one of them big back bucks by the leg,
How many people did it take for a grown deer to handle them?
well, on one of them bucks, there's about 4 to 5 of us.
That's what I was figuring it had to be. I knew it had to be rough.
Mm-hmm.
Cause I know one time Dr. Keith Causey was one of the ones that headed the thing up. We were there, and I didn't know Keith was left-handed. And I got on the left side and caught the deer by the leg, and Keith got the right leg. As we brought that deer out the trap, Keith lost his grip. Now with me holding on to an 8-point buck doing this. Keith hollering, somebody help him, somebody help him. They come up and Bill Hamrick finally jumped on the deer's back and brought it down, and the other 3 or 4 men come up there and held it down to get that radio on them.
So a squeeze box is probably similar to what they use in cattle.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Okay.
yeah. But it was a little old box. It's about as high as this table and about that wide, wasn't it, Freddie?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just long enough when his butt went in, it was against the door, and his nose was against the front.
Any bigger, and they could have
Well,
hurt
it
themselves
depends.
bouncing around.
We'd look at the deer and see if we could handle it. If we couldn't handle it, we turned it loose.
I got you. Yeah.
The only thing we trapped was something we could handle.
Yeah.
And I've seen deer over the years that we've had in them traps. His horns would be so wide, he'd have to turn his head sideways to come out of that trap.
You didn't want to mess with that one.
You didn't want to mess with Granddaddy.
So y'all put them in a box and moved them in the box?
Yeah, with the box, we had hauling crates. We called it. Had 6 compartments on it.
I got you.
A small, like 2 yard into 2 small rows, we could put in one hole. It was big enough to hold 2 deer, and they still had room. But a buck, we put it in the box to itself, because if you didn't, it'd kill them does in there.
Wow.
One thing I always think about when trapping deer is, people complain all the time, like, oh, I can't grow big deer on my property. I tried everything, and they have a ceiling. They just never get past 120 inches or whatever it may be. And, most places that deer exist now were relocated to those areas. So clearly, wherever they came from had a lot to do with the original genetics that were brought back in. And then I think back in those restocking days, trophy hunting wasn't a thing. Nobody really cared about the size of the rack. And so it wasn't like, oh, we're going to bring these like genetically superior racks of deer in from someplace that the deer look like they're in Iowa to, you know what I mean? So like, I think a lot of the case where, your deer have a certain style their antlers grow in. Cause like if you look at a deer from South Texas, from South Alabama, Iowa, Oregon, like they all look different.
Yeah.
It's like almost like they're subspecies of whitetail deer, and they may be.
Yeah.
I'm not a biologist, but it is always fascinating to look at. You're that's kind of the card you're dealt. You can enhance that the best you can, but you're not going to grow a deer in South Alabama that looks like one in Iowa. It's just not going to happen. I think a lot of that has to do with the restocking and where they came from.
That's got
Actually native to.
Got a lot to do with it.
But at the same time, that evolved. And whether it's true or not, I had a biologist tell me one time, they were talking about genetics, and it is a big deal, but it's not the only thing. It's like, got to remember what caused those great genetics was years and years and years of great nutrition.
Yeah.
So, I guarantee we've moved deer from here to somewhere that over time started to develop a lot bigger.
Yeah. There's some studies to back that now.
And you may know this. Isn't there like not subspecies of substrains? Maybe would that be a better word?
Oh,
of
there's
whitetail deer.
oh,
So
no
there's
doubt.
like
There's like
close to 30 substrains of deer.
Yeah, there's like 30 or 40 subspecies
Yeah.
of Oidocoleus virginiana, if that's how you pronounce it.
That's one. What's two?
Well, it would be the word after virginiana, which would denote the subspecies. So maybe there's a Florida or a key,
Yeah, okay.
a key deer.
That's right.
Well, you got a key deer.
Little bitty thing.
I was trying to remember too. We was talking to ask about the holding crate. I remember you had the 6 compartment holding crate that you hauled on the flatbed truck. All right. You actually had to have it on the ground to load the deer in?
Uh-uh.
All right. How did you get it?
We picked that deer up. It'd be 4 men on that crate. We'd pick it up,
You actually picked the squeeze box up.
picked it all up, put it there, and somebody be on top of the truck at the back door with that gate open and reach down and get this gate on the box and run the deer in there.
I was
Wow.
trying to remember because I couldn't remember you loading the hauling crate onto the truck. So then I kept thinking, I said, well, how did they get the deer from the squeeze box into the hauling crate? And it was just physical labor of
Manpower.
Yeah, I guess so.
And I remember you always saying you had a little bitty square on the end that you had to, he said, you got to have a little bit of daylight or that deer's not going to go in that dark hole. So
won't.
they'd have a little bitty window they had opened up, and that deer, he'd just about knocked the back end out of that
bet.
crate
So
when he come in there.
light.
So when y'all were trapping them in February and March, when they're around the time they shed their antlers, would they knock their antlers off a lot of times
Yeah.
running into the pen?
Yeah.
You're probably glad they did, I would imagine.
And there's been a time or two y'all actually had to saw the antlers off.
Yeah.
A couple of bucks.
I
Because
didn't
y'all were
want
trying to
to.
meet the quota, and you actually needed a couple of bucks, and
I didn't want
Had to-
to, but we had to.
actually cut the antlers off a couple of them to be able to get them in the crate and haul them off.
What'd you cut them off with? Just a handsaw?
Probably didn't have a
Hacksaw.
sawzall back then. Yeah, that would have made it
Oh.
easier.
Wasn't no Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So from when you got here in 1965, what was the deer herd like then compared to you worked 49 years? What can you kind of?
It was amazing down here in the 60s what kind of deer herd was here in Clark County.
So many deer. Woo.
I know my daddy worked down at Harris Lake down there for 11 years. And he kept telling them guys, said, guys, y'all need to kill some does. You're killing too many bucks. It wasn't nothing. Freddie can vouch
Yeah,
for
he
this
was way
guy.
ahead of his time, too. I wish we'd listened to him.
Down there. They drove deer down there.
Mm-hmm.
And I took Freddie down there when he was a teenager. And it wasn't nothing beyond one of them stands, see what, 30, 40, 50, 60 deer.
Yep.
I know one time he
And
run
one
up,
spike.
one rode up to me and Freddie. Which one did I shoot, Daddy? There's at least 10 bucks out there.
Oh,
I said,
wow.
pick out one and shoot it.
Yep. Yeah, you're just shooting
Yeah, I
air.
mean, back then it was white on top of their head. They got shot. It was a spike or 4-point or 6-point.
It did. They didn't know anything.
Like a lot of these people around here, if it had horns, it was down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we had the antiquated law of a deer a day.
Go down there to Choctaw Bluff and look. They still all those racks on the wall. All the buildings right there around the clubhouse are just full of racks at 4 points and 5 points and 3 points and 8 points, whatever you want.
And it was like that 30 years ago, too.
So were the deer bigger back then?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't nothing to kill a deer back then. It weighed 200 pounds. If you kill one now, it weighs 160. You think you done killed an elk.
So
Yeah.
talk to me about antlers specifically. You've pointed at a picture over there in your den of a great big buck. I
You
mean,
got to have nutrition and age. That's like when I worked on one of these management areas years ago. There's a guy up there hunting. He killed a deer. He said, we don't kill the deer up here on this Scott's management area like we used to. I said, mister, you want me to tell you why? He said, yeah. I said, that little buck you got right there got antlers that long. I said, he's as old as he'll ever get. You got to let him get some age on him.
Yep.
Yeah.
we tell Dudley that all the time. It seems to go in one ear and out the other.
I think that's Lanny.
So I keep drawing back to wondering in the 60s, would a mature buck, it would be not uncommon at all for a mature buck down here to weigh 200 pounds.
That's right.
But as the years have changed, as the habitat
The has changed, and the deer's interbred too. You hadn't got the genes like you had years ago now. But you take just like here around my house, right over across the road. That clear cut pine trees like that. I ain't never seen a pine tree put out acres.
That's a great point. So would you say it's rare to see a 200-pound deer around here now?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Is that the same thing they experience?
Yeah, it's been so long since I've been down there. So I know that the hurricane did clean. Ivan made a big swath. A lot of timber had to be cleaned up, cut. You know, they also allowed for people to cut and do some tax-free stuff with it. And also it brought on a lot of timber cutting. And if you remember, it was the end of Portland we were losing it, and it got just hammered. And so I do think that browse probably helps some. But I hear stories that they don't kill that many deer at all. Not
Over
like they used to.
Choctaw Bluff, they ain't done nothing over there.
Not nothing like what they used to. So, but they did. What happened back there? You know, as big an area as it seemed to be, it was still a little narrow corridor, even if it's 5 or 10 miles wide of river swamp. And the predominant tree in the river swamp was swamp chestnuts. I mean, I can remember as far as I could see and walking for half a mile, and the woods were just white everywhere because all the trees, and literally it was just millions of those big golf balls just everywhere. So my point in saying this, there would be, I'm guessing, 4 times the deer density in December that there had been in October and November, because they would leave there for the summer and try to go to some areas with a little bit more food and some browse maybe. But then for the winter, they were packed into that. And that's why people wanted so bad to have that river swamp, you know, for deer hunting. But it was because that's where they moved to. And that was the same way in, you know, the old Sturdy Oak place by Neil's father-in-law up there. And that they had the same thing. And they had, actually, that place had a big, like 1,000 acres of soybeans next to it.
Wow.
They
So for a while, they had this huge, until they got out of whack, huge density of deer, but really good quality deer.
Well, they had fallow deer. And
Yeah,
they ended up
sure
killing the fallow. The whitetail deer started coming back, and it reversed course, and the fallow deer ended up getting killed off. But at one time, they only had fallow deer in that swamp on the
That's
Alabama
interesting.
River. Yeah,
I've never heard that.
Oh yeah.
right there at Miller's Ferry, right outside Camp.
but
They couldn't compete with the white.
You know, we had that podcast with Kyle Liebarger and Jake Brown. It's been a couple years, but Jake brought a photo from an old aerial from the Choctaw Bluff area. Remember, he showed it to you.
Yep.
And all you could see was widely spaced longleafs.
Yep.
And
Yep, that's
lots of food and cover in between.
Mr. Fred
So-
talked about the Sand Hill Creek area. That was just longleaf pine.
And
Sand
so
all
if
up
you
through
think
Well, you
about
take
it-
right through here for miles.
That's right.
The gains go over County Road 2,
Mm-hmm.
which would be 8 miles, airline through it.
So that's
Longleaf forest.
Nothing but.
nothing but
but.
widely spaced trees
Yeah.
and sunlight hitting the ground and all kinds of vegetation growing up that the deer can eat.
And that's most of the year. I mean, you know, different things grow this time of year. I mean, and I think that's people get into a one-track mind sometimes, thinking, oh, I have to have row crop and agriculture around in the 3 months so that the deer's growing his antlers to make him a big buck. Well, it's like as humans, if you only ate healthy for 3 months out of the year and ate crap food for 9 months, you wouldn't reach your full potential.
And then
And deer's the same way. They need nutrition 12 months a year to reach.
Now we
their
learn
potential.
it's like what he eats as a phone. So for a deer to really put on great antlers, he's got to have good nutrition his whole life. We talked about early. He and I agreed that clover is our favorite forage that we would plant because you're doing something for him. You know, if you get a good stand, 365 days a year.
And then a
Which
lot
they-
of the hardwoods back then were better for wildlife too, if you think about it, because they weren't getting harvested every 60 to 80 years.
That's right.
And so you were having big trees fall over all the time, wind blown, and there's your sunlight. You know, there's your cane thickets, there's your weeds they can eat on. And then, of course, they got acorns all winter and early spring.
But you take that longleaf forest, if you go in there and burn it every 3 to 5 years, you got legumes that's coming back up.
Oh, yeah.
It's there.
That's right.
It's putting out food, plus your young tender sprouts that's coming on in the spring. You had plenty to eat.
And it's just not anywhere close to. I mean, the industrial forests of today, unless you specifically manage them for wildlife, it's just not even
It's
close
not
to
here.
what.
Mr. Fred, how far back can you remember prescribed burning taking place? Does that happen your whole life, or when did that start?
I'm not saying prescribed burning, but I know down in Washington County, just about every spring, the people that run cows and up here,
Right. They burn it for the
they
cattle
burn
grazing,
it for the cows every
Yeah.
year.
Oh, yeah.
Every
What does
year.
that tell you? That tells you the kind
Yeah.
of grazing that it
Yeah.
inspired in the.
But y'all didn't actually start doing that on the sanctuary, implementing a burn program until after you had been there a while, did you?
Well,
No,
Mr.
you-
Dykes had just started when I went there in
I
'65.
know you went to the burn school.
I went to the burn school and all that.
But it definitely
Mississippi-
makes a lot of difference.
Oh,
You
no
could see it
question
in the
about it.
I
forest
went to
there.
Mississippi State, stayed over there a week on that prescribed burning
How
school.
about that?
Richie is awake.
He's absolutely. He's a
Take
professional.
that, Bobby.
He's a professional burner.
Yeah.
Wow.
Arsonist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like to burn, but I respected it now.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't just go out there and drop a match.
No. No.
So in all these years of managing a place intensely that had no hunting pressure on it at all, did you ever see just, are there some bucks burned in your mind that you're just like, oh my God, if I could show you a picture of this buck, here's a 180 inch.
Yeah.
Did you ever see stuff like that?
Yes, sir.
That's what's burned in my mind. That's why.
I bet, yeah. He was making a face. You were looking that way, Bobby.
Yeah.
When you were saying that, he was making a face down here.
Yeah.
Because he was a kid seeing all that.
So they died of old age there.
But I just like that picture on the wall. We've seen deer down that big on it and on that wall.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
It was just amazing, no hunting ever there. And I think it goes back to prove how much the age structure plays a part into it. I look back, and I'm not exaggerating. You could ride around 5 or 6 fields and see 30 or 40 bucks, rack bucks. But you would see some during the year that were sure enough exceptional bucks. But, because they had no hunting there and they didn't feed, they just planted, plots with clover and different other things in there and whatever they got from the habitat. And I mean, that just proves you can grow some pretty good deer if you give them the time to reach an age of maturity.
And I guess if you took a sanctuary like that and didn't hunt, obviously it would become overpopulated. But they're trapping deer off the sanctuary, so they're essentially doing the same thing as if you did hunt it. But you're taking a healthy amount of does and bucks as opposed to the hunting clubs around here that were all shooting bucks. So if you got off the sanctuary, everything that was hunted was just majorly lopsided.
Right.
And then you go into the sanctuary, there's 30, 40 bucks you can ride around.
Right.
So.
But I know Doctor, you remember, whenever I hunted over to Bluff, you didn't shoot a spike over there.
They wouldn't let you shoot spikes. They would let you shoot. They thought there was a difference that the cow horn.
A cow horn.
A cow horn, if it had a curve and more than like 6 or 8 inches to it. But that was, we didn't know. I mean, it was just shameful if someone accidentally shot a doe. It would be as bad as, a hen turkey, but we just didn't know any better.
Sure.
So, but what happened was when they first moved in, and he can remember, it was before even my time, that's when they had such a healthy deer herd.
Oh, yeah.
And then continuing to shoot nothing but the bucks and not shooting the does, ran it in the ground pretty much. And so
can you remember and kind of tell a little bit about when they first said, okay, we're going to have doe days or a doe season? And Alabama, actually, you could kill a doe a day
you could, not anymore, but you could.
At some point. When did that start, though? Do you remember that?
What's
That
that?
started in the 70s, didn't it? Mid-70s?
I don't remember. I just remember looking up and going, there's no tagging system and a deer a day.
Because they started that
2 deer a day.
Two does a day, all
DMP management thing. That's when the clubs, biologists would go look and say, you need to kill X number of deer.
Right. Yep.
And we give them X number of tags they had to put on that deer.
Mm-hmm. I do remember the very first taggings.
It started that way, then they got where they got off the tagging thing, then turn it you could kill a doe or a buck, or a buck and a doe.
But even off of that, though, the state of it during the 80s, you could kill a buck or a doe if you just release some ground or that seems like that was very forward thinking at the time.
But at the same time, when I watched it turn the corner, I was old, and I can say I'm old enough to see this one turn the corner. So there was, unfortunately, we all have our own egos in some form, and so the rack on a buck stirs something up in all of us. Just face it, and or most of us. So it was the big brag or ego or things. How many rack bucks you killed? Because in Alabama, you didn't even have a tagging system. It was one a day. Mm-hmm. So it got out of whack, and that was the big brag. And all of a sudden, it took a little while, and I guarantee you, Mr. Fred saw it. You saw it. So some people were listening and trying, and wasn't a lot, but they were going to listen to the biologists, and I think the Stimpsons were early on. They always listen to biology, and I was around them, but they were saying, you got to shoot your does, you got to let the bucks grow up and whatever. And so a few people started, and they saw some progress, but we turned the corners. My whole story point is when people started getting embarrassing Because we're all today, if we shot a deer too young or too small, we would be embarrassed at the skinny rack. So when people started getting embarrassed at that, it helped turn the table. Honestly, I hate to say that would cause the behavior shift, but it did. And of course, a lot of it was in the people that were using a little bit of discipline started shooting bigger and better deer too. But when I've watched and people, and I remember Bob Dixon kind of taught that to me a little bit, because his big brag would be, he would Bob, from like, I killed this deer or that deer, this many deer, he would say, I passed 27 rack bucks this year. And that became all of us talking about, man, I passed 32 deer this year. Well, it's like, maybe that's bragging, but it was the right behavior that it inspired.
It's funny, the scale.
Good point.
It used to be you're going to shoot a buck if it has horn. If it has horns on top of his head, kill him. And then it was like, all right, you're measuring these deer if he's inside the ears or outside the ears. Well, I saw a buck today and he was inside the ears. I didn't shoot him. And then it became to, well, he's about 15 inches wide. Well, he's about 16 inches wide. But there was never like,
He's a 3-year-old.
He's probably a 3-year-old. I bet he scored 127
That started
and a half.
in the late 90s is when that started.
Yeah, and so the scoring thing definitely came later, because it was literally, I mean, people just, well, he's inside the ears, outside the ears.
And
that was it.
now it's coming full circle again. A lot of these DNRs are telling folks, shoot just as many bucks as does, because they're trying to lower the numbers.
Yeah, well, the deer density.
Yeah, you got to bring it down some within reason. Mr. Fred can tell you, though, my whole life till whatever 20 plus, so till in probably the 80s, if you ask someone, say, man, I heard you killed a good buck. How big was it? 12 point, 10 point. That's all we used to measure how big the deer was.
How many points?
And then someone might say, oh, he's big, tall, or he's big and wide, but the thing you would say was how many points. That was pretty much all you said.
The good old days.
Times have changed.
And I remember at the skin and shed, at about the time the tide was turning on, passing up bucks, and some people were and some people won't. Somebody would show up with like a 1-year-old 6-point, and they would talk about like, oh, look at all the fat on that deer. So they would brag about something besides it.
Well, then it got to be bragging about how many does you shot to your place, and that's what I get my burger from is my does. So I mean, we've learned.
Yeah,
we still got a lot to learn. I think we got.
Yeah, we're still learning.
You never get too old to learn. So
Exactly
The beauty of turkey hunting is there's no trophy hunting. You just long beard, which is Well, you can always pick out a deer hunter that doesn't turkey hunt much when they say, "Oh yeah, I passed up a 2-year-old the other day." Figured I'd let him get old.
Yeah, Mr. Fred, you'd probably like Daddy. Someone asked Mr. Fox, if 2 or 3 or 4 longbeards all come up in there, which one do you shoot? And he'd always say, first legal SOB, I can get my bead on.
you remember the time Mr. Billy killed 5 in one shot over?
I do. He was
94. Is that right?
3.
I don't know, 90s. It's back to 90.
He was way up in his 90s.
Yeah, I think he was 94, Mr. Billy Stimpson, and he went out hunting, and there was 4 or 5 guys came up and shot and killed all 5 of them in one shot. And he's 94 years old, and he called the game warden, his friend of theirs, and he turned himself in. He said, "Hey, I'm calling to turn myself in. I killed you because you can only kill one a day in Alabama." He said, "Oh, Mr. Billy, we'll let you slide on this one." And he said, "No, I want you to write me up." And he said, "I'm just calling to turn myself in." He said, "No, you're not calling to turn yourself in. You're calling me to brag, Mr.
I want
so I think they framed the ticket that they wrote.
It's over at the bluff somewhere.
Yeah, he was proud of it.
That's cool.
Wow. So is there another animal that you've? I mean, people just love whitetail deer so much, and we put so much value in the size of their antlers. Some of us, and look, it's such a great thing that we see now that people are saying, look, we're eating all this animal. People are nourishing their families with deer meat. That's a great thing. Yes, but there's still people that are caught up in the size of the antlers, and there's such a mystery around them. You've seen that through your
I've
career.
seen it.
Can you help explain that?
Well, some people just cannot stand to see a buck with horns on his head. You got to kill him.
Still exists. In fact, it's probably more through this world because it was there for so long,
Well, that's just like building a football team. You got to give it time to mature and get your best players out there on the field. Same way with deer or turkey. You got
Great.
to give them time.
Got a great analogy.
Yeah, what's that age that you think you've watched bucks grow up and probably die of old age? What do you think is that age that he's at his peak?
A deer's gonna get at his peak between 5 and 6 years old. After that, he may be a big 10 point and stay a 10 point for all of his life, but that as he gets older, them points is gonna come down.
Yeah. Wow.
You got to get anything. You got to give it some age and nutrition.
I'd love to seen this place in the '60s.
Oh, no doubt.
You need to go see it now at least. And
Makes you really think about, timber stand improvement, because what has happened across the Southeast is with the loblolly coming in, it's real thick stuff. And, the more we learn about timber stand improvement and that early successional habitat, and then hear Mr. Fred talk about what this country used to look like, is what we got to shape it
he
into
can tell
more.
you too, the surrounding. I talked about this big, huge, mature forest they had that was such a draw in the winter, but outside of that, they weren't all just giant pieces of land. There was a lot of patchwork and small farms, and there was a little brushy stuff, a little timber, a pond, some cattle. It was real diverse and patchy, I think, back in the day more than when timber companies bought up huge tracts of land and started doing kind of monoculture tree farming.
But you take years ago, it's just like the quail. There's no quail around here. You look back,
So sad.
it's a number of pea patch farmers.
Yep.
It had farms. The fence row growed up, quail habitat. Then that went to the wayside. Herbicides had come in and killed a lot of that.
I think so. Well, I mean,
Makes a lot of
you also
sense.
had their own little game warden.
Oh,
If
yeah.
they got 40 or 20 or 80 acres. They're watching that, and they're watching the predators and stuff too. So that's probably helping the quail. And then when it's just like thousands of acres of, not to knock that, but the timber company or
that's
a
right.
landowner, they're not able to do that, and predators can start to build back up again.
Yeah, that was a
Okay.
good point about the fence rows.
Yes. Wipe
Used
them
to, people would cut down a cedar and make a fence post out of it and leave the top laying there.
Yeah.
And that would become a little mini
Habitat
thicket.
hiding place for the quail
And,
to get in.
and then it evolved to where, we're putting in T-post and barbed wire, and then you come by and spray under it every year.
Yeah.
So it's just
Yeah.
a big swath of nothingness now
That's right.
with no
Most of
connectivity.
as far as quail, it's such a mystery as what happened to them because they're essentially just a small turkey. They get nest on the ground, but they just can't seem to make a comeback. I mean,
They're
these
very
big
particular.
plantations like in South Georgia. I mean, those people were spending multi-millions of dollars a year managing those populations. So obviously that's not sustainable for 99.9% of the population. But one thing I have noticed just in my lifetime is the only places I see quail ever are where we burn.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it
I've
just
noticed
shows you
that.
the power of fire and using it properly.
And we were talking about it the other day. You think of South Texas and how open and how rangy it is, but they've got quail and they got giant deer.
What do you know? The guy
It never
from, the
grows
guy from
out of-
Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
It never gets out of succession.
It never grows out of early succession.
Exactly. And he was talking about, he was a Rio expert, but he was talking about they had a lot of quail there too. And that's what he said. It's not very good soil, so it can never grow past that early successional stage. It stays there that's where they have wild quail populations.
Yeah, I mean, like
The only
great
one I've ever
population.
loved.
cedar encroachment, mesquite encroachment, stuff like that can happen, and then you've got to set that back. It just it takes a lot longer for it to get out of
I would
early
say too,
succession.
you got to remember the cattle farming that goes in those areas does not allow for any predators. They will get them and wipe them out.
That makes sense.
Ring a bell if a coyote shows
Yes,
up, and
right.
they
Yep.
bring everybody.
That's
in.
right.
Yeah.
Everybody's coming out.
Yeah.
So it is, it's a shame. We've done, thanks to you, good gracious, what we've done with turkeys. Although it's had some headwinds, everybody's working. I say that, just about everybody. Everybody's aware of it. But the quail is a sad one. It was the grand bird.
That's what when we was doing that timber management. That's what the reason we turned it back into longleaf to get the quail habitat back. 'Cause every 3 years, 3 to 4, 5 years, we'd go in there and burn.
Yep.
Did y'all have a pretty healthy quail population?
When I first went to
Sanctuary?
work down there, it wasn't nothing. See places see 6, 7 covey quail in a day.
Wow.
When it got down to where you hardly ever heard one whistle down there in the morning.
Wow.
But they gradually, from what I hear, I don't ever go down there because it breaks my heart and I go down there now. It's gradually coming back because they have to go around and do that quail survey, go out and see how many birds are whistling and all that for a month or two.
I kind of want to.
They're coming back in pockets.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to ask you a little bit more about this deer stuff. Were you transporting any deer out of state? It all
One
stayed in-
time, Alabama swapped something to California out there. I don't forgot what it was, but anyway, it was in late February when we trapped those deer. We trapped 10 deer. A guy came in there with a pickup truck with just a little over 3/8 plywood box built on the thing, and you're going to put them all in there. And Miss Dykes looked at him and said, that deer is staying there about as long as I will. But anyway, we took the box that he had on there and let him borrow one of our haulage crates, and he took some deer out there for California. That's the only ones I know of that went out of state.
What do you think those deer thought when they passed the Grand Canyon?
California.
Doesn't look like
What are we
Alabama.
going to eat out of here?
Yeah, they had to get them. They had to drive straight through.
Yeah, they drove straight through.
Yep, they'd have to.
And during your tenure, was Alabama still receiving deer from other states? So that was before your time.
Before my time. All
Okay.
the ones I know Alabama received was in, I don't know how many they got in from Michigan
Okay.
and put up out on Black Warrior.
And so just like the turkeys, you would load them up on a truck and take them to a county and
If we caught them before 11 o'clock, somebody's butt sat down in the seat, and you took off, it may be 1 o'clock when you got back home. But after 11, we didn't take them because we had to go to North Alabama. Time we got up, it'd be dark, and we didn't
Right.
want to turn them loose when it's still light.
okay.
But I can tell you what, there's a lot of man hours in it. We was trapping deer and turkeys at the same time.
Wow.
I bet you drank a lot of coffee back then.
I did. That's what's wrong with my old back and butt now, sitting in that truck looking straight ahead. Take a load of turkeys up there, or while you gone, we going to set these traps. I get back home. If I left that morning at 3 o'clock, come in, take a break, maybe eat supper, go load up deer, crawl back in that sucker the next morning, and take off and do that for about 3 days a week.
Ouch.
You was ready to call a week.
I bet.
Yeah.
You went more than a week in 3 days.
Wow.
That's like one time they got us down where we was working just 40 hours a week. Caught some turkeys, and I looked at my watch. I said, good God, I'm working overtime. And I was up there between Birmingham and Coleman. I called my boss man in Montgomery. I said, Mr. Moody, what is it, Mr. Pringle? I says, I'm working overtime. I'm sitting between Birmingham and Coleman with a load of turkeys. I'm just going to pull over side the road and wait till Monday morning to go back to work. You know what to do and how to handle it.
And what was that?
Go do your job, and next week fudge on your fairy tale you had to send into Montgomery. Yeah, there's a lot of days I'm supposed to be working. I might be sitting down in the cutoff white perch fishing.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hey, Bobby, now you're getting after Bobby's heart right there. Yeah.
Lanny, we're always in here. We always have these interesting guests, and you're always on your computer. What's up?
I'm looking at Onyx the whole time. I love the app, but I love the desktop too.
My favorite thing is Bobby doesn't know how to shut his computer down,
Yeah.
so I can go in there and share his pins to my account.
That's what you were doing in there this morning.
Yep.
Back during deer season, I shot a couple of big bucks.
Of
But,
course.
As I'm looking for them, I can
Couple.
turn on this tracking feature.
Yeah.
And I can see where I've looked.
And I use that feature too for spreading seed, spreading fertilizer, spraying. It really keeps you on track.
Onyx is a great company. Look, we know Jared. They're hunters,
They
just
are.
like we are. So
Yes,
they're
no
serious
doubt
about
about
this.
it.
The way they've designed this thing, a hunter and a gamekeeper can take advantage of it and make their property better.
Use coupon code Mossy Oak to save 20% off of your Onyx subscription.
Yeah, and Mac, you shouldn't do that now. Richie, you got to help me. Okay. Let me ask you this. So as long as you've had this long storied career, and Alabama is such an unusual state, the rut is so late. When they finally extended the rut or extended the hunting season 10 days, how did that make you feel? What was your reaction to that?
It ain't changed. To me, it's usually gonna come in mid-January or late January and go out about the middle or last of February. This extended season they got, I do not like it.
And why would you say that? What would you not like about it?
If you can't kill a deer in regular hunting season and got to extend it on into the middle of February to kill a deer, you don't need to quit hunting.
Bobby?
Yeah. Well,
If you can't kill one in 90 days, you ain't much hunter.
Neil?
This,
It is
Not-
interesting, you know, in these states and areas that have a really late rut, that hunters are going in there and boogering those deer up every afternoon for like 3 months.
That's right.
And then
Yep.
the rut happens.
That's right.
Well, you look,
So it probably makes it a lot harder to hunt in the rut because the does are scared to move. You know,
look
because
in
they've
the
been
rut.
hunted for.
You look in the rut. You killing your prime stock.
Yep.
You killing it off. That's just like you own a bunch of cows. If you wouldn't and kill your prize bull, what would you have? You wouldn't
Not
have
prize.
nothing.
Yeah.
That's like turkey season. I don't agree with the turkey season.
What's your theory on that?
Come in March the 15th, go out April 25th.
And when does it go out now?
Goes out now in
May.
May the 2nd.
Yeah.
Starts-
May 8th.
May
They moved it back
May
to
10th.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be. It's the
starts March 25th.
March 25th. They moved it back a week or more and gave that week on the end for people. So.
Well, heck, when I worked on that sanctuary, I seen young poults in late April and May.
Yep.
Well, then now you can go out there and kill a poach. They don't got big enough to fry.
And not many states have a season. The issue here is there's such a long season, Mississippi too. So a lot of states they don't start hunting until way into the breeding season, and we have always started a little bit earlier. And I mean, the problem now is it just is what it is. I don't want to be taking. I'd rather them give us some more days. At least I could go maybe, you know. But it's such a long season. If you shorten the beginning to give them more time undisturbed to breed, to keep everybody happy, they're putting it on the back end. And I mean, it could still be pretty good back then. And I would say, you know, if you kill one really late, it's probably better for the herd or whatever, the flock, than shooting one real early. They've proved that has an issue to do. But I'm gonna go with what the biologists say. Are they gonna be right every time? No. But they're gonna be more right than I am. So
a lot of
just like
controversy.
your life.
Yeah,
Woods,
especially with the breeding.
I'm gonna listen to you. You know.
Yeah, well, the problem is with the moving the season back and shooting the turkeys too early. All that. There's biologists. Some agree with that. Some don't agree with it. Nobody can completely agree 100% across the board, even among the biologists. And so there's a lot of people that are unhappy because this guy may hate moving the season back, and he's going to point to, well, this biologist said it doesn't matter, and then someone might argue against them, saying, well, this biologist said this. You know, so it's really hard to.
It is hard.
And if you think about it,
conclusion on
it's
that.
just really interesting that our beloved wild turkey and our beloved spring that we all love so much, that is the mating season when we're trying to hunt them and shoot them.
Yeah.
And that's by far when we say is the best time to hunt the wild turkey is in the spring of the year. But if you really think about it, we probably should have been hunting in the fall all along and just letting them.
No.
I agree. I agree with you. I love my beloved spring, but it probably would be better for the population if we were hunting
the sporting side of us.
But
wants to
if
hunt
you
them in
waited
spring.
to the backside of it, you're not affecting that.
limits should solve that.
True.
It's not.
Yeah, we
True.
do have. Very
Can
liberal
while we're here at turkeys, I'd just like to ask this question: have you witnessed and watched with these unmolested turkeys how long it takes them to establish a pecking order in the spring? I mean, I just wondered if there was a.
They pretty much. You think they've already established it by the time it gets there? They just established it all year long. Yeah.
So the thought is that if you shot that dominant gobbler on a hunt in March 15th, that it might take a week or 10 days to reestablish that pecking order, and then there's some breeding that's missed in there. Is my
They
understanding?
might be. I wouldn't say they are, but they might be. But
Well,
I know.
I think people are trying to say that the hen is picking the gobbler. She has to let him breed her,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know. So, and I think some research has tried to indicate that. So, if she's got a gobbler, she lives out there with them all year long. She pretty knows who she's going to be with, and of course, that's usually the one. Maybe he's whooping everybody's butt, and he's got some hens and stuff. But they're just trying to say if you kill that gobbler with all the hens too early, could be, it's not all, nothing's 100%. She is not as quick to like deer. You might shoot the old buck, and if she comes in heat, someone's going to breed her.
Yes.
That's just going. There's no stopping that. But they're just saying that hen might not take to another gobbler well, and might not have as many eggs, or she might not even. I don't know if that's true or not. But that was the logic behind it. That the hen is actually picking. If you kill her boy too soon, it might really affect. And of course, when everybody's hunting and everybody's killing them, most of that goes down the opening day or two. So I think that's the discussion we're
It'll
having.
be interesting to see in 5 or 10 years how it plays out when they do start proving some of our theories,
Yes.
and whether we'll be just completely wrong or
Right.
right or
Yeah, but here's what I do know is like if you let your population get out of whack in your ratio and you're killing too many gobblers and putting too much hunting pressure on them, you're not managing your habitat and you're not doing these things,
they'll be gone.
it won't matter.
That's right.
That comes over everything. Let's go
Isn't,
Mr.
isn't
Fred
it funny?
did, you know?
Isn't it funny how we started this conversation?
And we're back on
deer,
turkey.
we're back on
That's what I was
turkeys?
going to
10
say.
minutes
We
ago,
can't
we're going
help
right back
it.
talking about turkeys.
Yeah.
And would y'all notice all the awards here on the table?
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
I mean,
it really
it-
is.
Yep.
Wildlife Manager of the Year.
And there should be
Alabama
more.
Wildlife Manager of the Year.
Yeah,
Wildlife Conservationist of the Year.
yeah. You've had,
Excellence in Wildlife Management Award.
And honestly, it's not enough.
No, it isn't enough. Good point.
what,
I think
what
his
a
biggest
career.
reward is watching what's happened to the bird itself around the country. I guarantee you.
It's amazing.
That's the best award he could ever get.
Yeah,
And the
like
dog even
So
told
there-
us the same.
second,
Yeah.
second.
Agree
to
with
that.
you.
That's right.
Look, we're probably running out of questions to ask about deer. I'd ask for everybody to bubble one up if you got one. But I'm going to ask you one more. When you had access to all this, the sanctuary, were you into hunting sheds? Would you look for shed antlers? And do you have a secret?
All
to
the
help
time we looked for shed out was walk over them food plots and look for them so you wouldn't run over it with a tractor.
Yeah, that's not the way to find them. It's not with a
He,
tractor.
he
tractor.
left
No.
that shed hunting up to me. That's what I enjoyed.
Yeah,
that's
I
cool.
saw him. doing that.
Well, do you have a secret? If someplace that you would always look, trails or
Well, like he said, they had, I don't know how many food plots, bunches of them. And of course, you had to wait, of course, till they dropped. But I was always hoping it would stay kind of cool weather because those food plots, if you got warm weather before the sheds came in, started dropping, you to get that growth
That
of
jump
make
of
it hard to
growth.
see. Man, I could ride up there a lot of times and scan, get out and make a quick look. A lot of times you could drive up there and see them in the fields, and then walking the edge of the fields, of course, is great places to find them too.
Food.
yeah.
I found some good ones.
So, what about like other wildlife? Are there bears in it? Have you had to put up with or
Not around here. I know years ago, and Toxic probably remember it too. There used to be a lot of bear up in these woods, the Mobile River or Scott Paper when they
Yeah,
got it.
I don't remember ever seeing one myself, but I know they've been in Mobile County and across the river. I don't know why the river would keep them from coming over here, but there's quite a few in Mobile County.
Oh,
Still
we had to
today-
go down there and
today
trap
there is.
bear
Yeah.
and relocate them.
There's
Yeah.
a bunch of everything like north of Saraland, all
Yep.
in that.
But they're
Lower
not dense
Mobile
over
River
here
Delta.
yet.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
But I've seen them down here in the woods
Does
here.
anybody want to ask him the question?
Yeah, well, I know.
I kind of
know.
want to
Yeah,
ask about the black-headed turkeys too. If
Oh,
he's ever,
mossheads?
yeah.
Mossy heads.
It's a
Yeah,
great
the
question.
Okay, so a lot of folks think that there's something called a mossy head turkey or a really, really old.
Some of the turkey hunters call them a hen, an old mossy head hen, but for the mossy head turkey, I don't ever remember seeing moss on his head.
So you've never trapped like a 15-year-old really, really black turkey with a 15-year-old, a 15-pound, like a really
Oh, we
small
trapped-
gobbler with a
I
bunch of.
guarantee you trap grown turkeys that were 12 or 13 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's the average. Even now, the average size of a mature gobbler around here is 14, 15 pounds.
Okay.
Even now, yeah.
So where we are, they're
If
like
you killed a-
17, 18.
Yeah, if you killed an 18-pound
20.
turkey here,
You
that
done
would
got
be-
you got a trophy.
So, do you
Yeah.
think the turkeys here were a native bird?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah,
These were the native birds.
Oh, yeah. A million percent. No question about that.
deer were native deer here.
Mm-hmm.
But I know back, I can't remember what year it was, but I've heard my dad and him talking about the black leg came in and liked to wipe the deer herd out, just like cows to get black tongue and all that. And another thing that hurt around here was years ago when the screwworm was so bad.
Screwworm.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I think they have found screwworm again, maybe in Mexico.
Well, when we were, say, the 70s, I remember that the biologists, the deer over there, they were getting too dense a deer herd, and they were getting these liver flukes. And I can remember when they would get deer and they'd cut that liver open, it'd just be these.
Well, I remember the bunch.
Yeah, this big, flat, leechy looking things.
Forrest Kellogg, them, I think he was from Georgia, come down over Choctaw Bluff and do that, collect deer and check them for diseases. And I went over and worked with them. I ain't ever seen as many junk come out of a deer in all my life. And like he was talking about, you cut that liver open,
man,
shoot, you could fill up
that's
a
what,
quart bucket full of leeches.
They've got issues. A lot of you can just look at a liver in a deer, and a lot of times and tell if the
Big,
deer's got
big old
issues.
white spots on it.
Mm-hmm. Sure would.
Well, look, this question had to come.
Yes.
We were just, there's no way we cannot ask this question. So
Tox is
Lanny,
going to roll his eyes. But
I'm going to make them edit it out so nobody will ever hear this. Don't worry about it, whatever it is.
you ever seen or heard of any long-tailed cats?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Remember that Jack Arundel is in the Mobile River Delta.
That's the guy was telling me about it, a year or two ago. We saw a long-tailed cat up at the house, and I believe it was a panther. I said, let me tell you something. As many game cameras as out in these woods. If there's a long-tailed cat around here, somebody would have him on camera.
Bobby,
oh,
Mr.
well, we see some pictures every now and then.
Oh, I got pictures right here. But
Yeah,
So what? Wait,
someone's
so
house cat
you
is
said
getting
you'd
up
seen
close
one.
to the
What
camera.
you
what, Bobby?
you said yes, I have seen one. So can you give us explain that?
Have you seen one?
I ain't never seen one.
Oh,
He's
okay.
heard stories
He's
of
heard
it.
I've heard
stories,
stories.
but he
Okay.
ain't never seen it.
I ain't never seen it.
But
Most of 'em are
the
sort of-
camera thing is, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's not far fetched to think because from Central Florida down, I mean the state tries to say that they're endangered, but they're not.
Oh, the Florida panther?
Yeah, like
They're everywhere.
they say there's 100 in the whole state, and there's cattle farmers down there. They're like, well, I've seen 10 in the last 10 days.
Well, Greg had one, pretty much lay beside him.
Everybody,
Yeah,
anybody
that's
that
right.
guys down there has had encounters with them. There are a bunch of them, but I mean, it's not.
They don't know where the state line is.
Yeah, I mean, those things are definitely we're going to move further north out of that.
So,
But
so you
years,
had to ask, didn't you?
but years ago, it was up. I don't know if it's in Sumter County or where up there, but some guy up there killed one of the last known sighting of a
Huh, I hadn't heard of that one.
cougar around here.
Mm-hmm.
That was back in the early 30s, 40s, somewhere in there.
I wonder if
I
you
don't.
had to pay
I've
a
never
$500
remembered
ticket like that
anybody
old
talking
bullshit
about that.
express.
I do remember people had seen. I never saw one, but they'd seen a bear, seen a track at a. They took a picture of a track when brought it back in, developed the film. It was that was a bear track, but never a long-tailed cat that I can remember.
Well, I know last year, there's a guy and his wife's coming out of the swamp just before you get to the church. There's a bear come out the edge of the road and turned and went back. And there the Keith and them Freddie knows who I'm talking about in their big yard. And his son-in-law was out there cutting the grass and saw this black spot over it. Says, what's that in the yard? He went over and looked, and there's a water bear poop about that big in his yard.
Wow.
Now, I've seen them down in that Harold Lake swamp.
Yeah. That's some wild country.
Yeah, I'm glad they're here.
Oh, yeah.
And the state of Alabama's doing a lot to try to bring them back. Mississippi is being very successful with the bears.
Neil
so.
actually saw the only one that we know of
Yeah.
in Clay County at the Dabbs place
Yeah.
a couple years ago.
Yeah, you saw
that.
one
There's
next Knoxville County, too, didn't you?
Yeah, Riley and I
Yeah.
saw one on the bank.
Bobby,
of the
what are you
Knoxville
going to
River.
do at the Ponderosa when one shows up and just loves to hang out at your feeder all day?
I don't know.
Eats all your record rates.
Yeah,
What are you gonna do?
we'll deal with that when it happens. We had to ask you that question. It seems like when you travel around, everybody's got to know their uncle's friend saw
saw
a
one.
long-tailed cat. We just always ask about that. So, guys, what other questions do we need to be asking, Mr. Fred?
I think you need
I
to let
think-
him go show you around. Is what I think.
Yeah, I think we've been sitting here for a couple hours. I think we've
Well, thanks for letting me get acorns in your yard. That
We're not done
sounds
yet.
funny, but
We're going to grow some Pringle oaks at the nursery.
yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
What's your favorite? That's a question. What's your favorite oak tree? What type? If you had to pick a tree, you own some place.
White oak.
White oak.
There it is.
I can't believe you didn't say sawtooth.
Oh,
I ain't never had no dealers with
I love
sawtooth.
swamp chestnuts.
Swamp chestnut, man. Okay.
I like the white oak and the swamp chestnut.
That's right.
Yeah.
Everybody's favorite.
Yes.
How about
It's
that?
best.
Everybody's
about
favorite
that?
deer stand is sitting in a grove of swamp chestnut.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Mine's not.
Well, this has been a really special. This has been 2 podcasts. We did one with turkeys, guys. You can go back and listen to that one if you hadn't. It's special, and then we've got where we learned about trapping the deer with Mr. Fred Pringle. It's just been our honor to sit here at your table in your house,
I'm glad to do it.
and talk to you.
Glad to do it.
There's a book, there's a poem, there's a song, and it's a great title. All of them is like A Life Well Lived. So tip all of our hat to you, and your family too. But
Yeah, and
I
thank
was
you.
just lucky enough we kind of crossed paths enough for me to know about you to bring all this to light for everybody. So
Yeah. And Freddie,
Yeah.
thrilled to have you here.
Well, I appreciate it.
You've got to witness all this.
I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting it, but it's been a great
well,
honor.
you got a career out of it too, being in timber your whole life, and you grew up. You knew more about the woods before you went to school on it or anything.
But it's definitely been an honor,
Yeah.
to see what he was able to accomplish for the state of Alabama and surrounding areas.
The whole country.
Yeah,
through
the whole
that.
southeast.
And it was an honor to sit here with y'all and see what y'all are doing.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Mr. Fred, is there anything you'd like to say in closing? Let you have the last word here.
No, I just think I've been able to take a small part to see where the turkey and deer have come into the state of Alabama. From some little something I done, they helped bring it up there.
I wouldn't call it a little something.
I mean, Bobby, sometimes God has a way of putting the right person in the right place. That's just all you can, the only
Amen.
explanation you got.
Neil, did you tell anybody about how this? Did you tell on the air how this situation happened?
Oh yeah, well, So last year we were at Choctaw Bluff one day. Me and Nathaniel Maddox, who filmed and ended up producing the Fox and the Colonel documentary that we put out last year, and we were getting some. We were up here at Choctaw Bluff, just getting some supporting content around that, and we had tried an interview or two, and I remember looking at Nathaniel or Brad Garris or someone. I said, man, I really wish we could find the right person to hit on all the history of the Fred T. Stimpson Sanctuary and all the trapping that they did on over the years. And about that time, Mr. Fred pulled up, just happened to be driving by.
Random, yeah.
He said he hadn't even been down there since that day, and that's been over a year ago. And just the chances of him just happening to drive by within 10 seconds of me looking at Brad saying, wish we had the right person to speak on that. And Brad looked out in the parking lot. He said, well,
There's
that
your man right there.
He said, that man right there ran the trapping
you
program
go.
for 40 years at the Fred Stimpson Sanctuary. I said, well, all right, well, let's get him in, sit him down and interview him. So he was actually a part of a small part of that story. If you watch
Interview.
you watch
Did
that
you watch it?
documentary, he's in it.
Isn't
Yeah.
it good?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
Wow.
Some things
Wow.
just aren't chance. Some things.
Nope.
No.
No. Wow.
Cool
Well-
story, bro.
Yeah, I think it would mean a lot to all of us, and you too, to show them around some, because I want y'all to, before it gets too late, to go through.
That sounds good.
Yep.
Mr. Pringle, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
We have enjoyed this.
Well, I've enjoyed it too.
Yep. And I know our listeners have. Well, guys, we thank y'all for listening. We thank y'all for watching the TV show. Richie, you did a great job bringing all this stuff down here, setting
the
all this
road,
up.
Richie.
Let's hit the horns one time for Richie if we could. There we go. All right.
That's enough, Richard. Don't ever let the guy in charge of the horns ring the horns.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Why don't you
man.
say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.